I am Marcus James Dixon with Gold Derby, and we are here with Will Sharpe from The White Lotus Season 2 on HBO. You play Ethan Spiller, a husband who travels to Sicily with his wife and another couple. And I'm curious, what was your absolute favorite part about playing this character?
That's a good question. I think it was probably well, the first thing that I was drawn to was probably like how different his behavior is at the end of the series compared to how you meet him at the beginning, and that sort of build towards him, I guess, snapping in a way, for better or worse, and where the sort of stuff he's been pushing down comes to the surface. That was enjoyable to play, and also maybe like the sort of inscrutability of him, like how enigmatic he was and how almost like a kind of I don't know, just like sort of weird enigma of a man, at times. That was like challenging on the page, and like one of the, yeah, again, sort of like more enjoyable aspects of Ethan, I guess, like trying to get to the bottom of that and like who he is exactly and why he's behaving in the way that he is. Whether it's stuff he's doing that I disapprove of or would question, and trying to sort of imagine how you get to a place where that feels like the right thing to do, or if it's stuff that I think where I think he's sort of behaving with good intentions and sort of trying to be pacific and not rock the boat. Yeah, both equally fun parts of him, I suppose. I like that he's like morally ambiguous, I suppose. Like he's some of the characters in this season, which deals, I think, like in no small way with toxic masculinity and certain gender roles. Like some characters sort of present immediately as quite obviously toxic and dysfunctional, whereas with Ethan, at first maybe there's like a sense that, oh, he's just like a normal nice guy, and then in an insidious way, I think his behavior becomes just as problematic as anyone else's, really, like just in a different way.
And that's sort of the genius of Mike White's writing, that so many of these characters are so flawed and vulnerable at times. And I'm curious, what was he like as a director? I mean, I know him from Survivor and The Amazing Race, so all of a sudden he's got these Emmy Awards for The White Lotus.
He's like, he's also a bit of an enigma at times. Like he sort of likes to present as very laid back and does give you the illusion of freedom, but at the same time, I think that he's very precise actually about details and that he knows exactly what he wants. And he doesn't like to rehearse very much. And so we would talk about the characters and their journeys, like especially early on, sort of in our initial meetings. And I remember him saying, well, we can get into that, like various things about Ethan up top, but yeah, he doesn't like to over rehearse, which maybe gives it like a sort of tension, like aliveness, perhaps, like in the moment. And definitely, actually, one thing I found was that if there was ever an instinct to play something for laughs, even if like the situation is funny, I think pretty early on I got the sense that actually he wanted us to play it as straight as possible and to be as honest as possible about the scene, and that kind of allowed tensions to bubble to the surface and for it to become more strained, I guess, and more sort of like agonizing at times, and less comfortable to play in a good way, so I think, yeah, like some of those scenes which maybe on first read felt like more comical to me, like more sort of like sex farcical, and almost I was thinking at one point like that there's a bit of sort of Midsummer Night's Dream about it, the way like the couples interact and stuff. But gradually, like the straighter we played it, the more I suppose you could say like tragic aspects of it would come through. for me as an actor, I guess, like trying to get into Ethan's shoes. And so then it's not to say that the scenes aren't funny too, but I think it meant that the agony of, the relationship in the marriage, or like the sheer fucked upness of the friendship with Cameron, like there was space for it to come through, like the straighter we played it, really.
I'm curious, how big of a fan were you of the White Lotus season 1? Did you know it was this huge juggernaut and that fans online would be analyzing every small little detail?
I didn't I didn't know about like the fans online analyzing every detail, but I'd watched the show and I really enjoyed the first season. I also really liked Enlightened. Um,
Yeah.
and I watched Chuck and Buck while we were shooting it, actually. But yeah, so I was a fan of Mike's writing, and I thought the first season was excellent. So yeah, I was excited and, to be honest, quite surprised to be a part of the second.
Well, let's talk about your scene partner, the hilarious Aubry Plaza. She plays Ethan's wife, Harper. What was your guys' working relationship like on day to day?
Well, I guess early on we tried to sort of get on the same page about like their hinterland and kind of where they came from, and so some of it would be just sort of deciding arbitrary things like how they met. I think we decided they probably maybe met at like someone else's wedding. And I think with Mike, Mike's thing with that relationship was he didn't want it ever to feel like it was any single thing that could be held responsible for the strain in the relationship. He wanted it to be simply that they had been together for a long time and that a kind of atrophy had come with that. So, I think we agreed it probably needed to be at least 7 years that they'd been together. And yeah, we would run the scenes occasionally. There was time to do that, I guess, as an ensemble. So there's, it's not like we're working all day, every day. And one of the nice things actually about the Ethan Harper scenes is that all of the stuff in the hotel room was right at the end of the schedule. So we had time to kind of like explore within that quartet what the dynamics were, and to get a sense of like what that felt like before going into what felt like a sort of the pressure cooker of that hotel room, where the reality of their relationship is kind of on full display. And it starts off kind of like they're obviously saying, oh, we're good together, we're honest with each other, and clearly they're not about the biggest stuff. And by the end of the series, I guess they are actually being honest with each other, but at that point it becomes quite painful. So there's also like a certain, like, I guess it was helpful that those scenes were at the end, because it meant that there was time to build up a kind of trust, so that it was easy to be sort of vulnerable, in that room, and to feel safe, even in like the sort of scenes where we're having quite a bad fight, for example. Yeah. But she took it very seriously, and obviously it's very funny, and it's like a great scene partner. But she really wanted to do a good job, and that was motivating for me too.
And the big turning point for your storyline is when the girls go away for the night, and then Ethan and Cameron sort of revert to being single college kids again. And
Yeah.
do you think Ethan regrets not telling Harper the truth immediately about what went down? So much drama could have been avoided.
Surely, yes, eventually, surely he would look back on that. That's a perfect example of where I feel like, obviously, as somebody's like objectively, I know that he's not doing the right thing. And it feels like you're making an emotionally unintelligent choice in this moment. But in the end, so much of it felt like it was just about him really being paralyzed by this fear that maybe, having ended up on this vacation sort of by mistake, I think, like in a hurry, oh, here's an invitation from Cameron, sounds good, we can afford it, let's see what happens. All of a sudden, like, his whole relationship is called into question, and it's kind of like, takes him a minute, I think, to confront that reality. And so a lot of his behavior, I think, is because he's not ready to look at it head on. And so I think that's where that comes from. And I guess, like, also I was thinking about that party scene, how, like, you know, he's holding on to the fact that he didn't sort of fully give in to, like, a kind of crazy night with these sex workers, and showed, like, a modicum of restraint, but he did open the door to it. So he was, like, curious enough to, like, let it into his room. And even that is kind of like, well, what does that say about him and where he's at? And yeah, so yeah, I mean, the short answer is, I think there's a lot of decisions that Ethan makes that I had to, as the actor, find the good intentions behind it, even if it is, as you say, like an unhelpful or even unethical choice he's making at times. Yeah.
After the finale aired, everyone online was talking about that scene between Ethan and Daphne, Megan Fahey's character. And it's heavily implied that the two characters walk off together and hook up. But I would love to know your take. I asked her this question too, and she said, yeah, I think something happened.
I mean, I think that's as far as we got, really. We really didn't talk about that aspect of it that much. But I think, like, with the vibe of the location, it has a sort of Mediterranean mystery about it, and the kind of way Mike was shooting it, felt like, okay, well, this is implying that something, you know, happened of note on that island, but it's deliberately ambiguous in the script, and so it felt like it would be deliberately ambiguous in the show too. And all I remember really about that scene is wanting, like, taking a pause before walking off into the sort of depths of the island, and wanting it to feel like Ethan is making a very deliberate active choice to follow her, and for it not to feel too much like a kind of just, oh, he's ethereally being swept inevitably along, particularly because in the earlier episodes, Ethan is someone who's very reactive, you know, in the story. Like, he's quite pacific, and so people are doing things to him and around him, and he is accommodating that and sort of responding to that. So I felt like, you know, now that he's kind of become, you know, sort of emotionally naked, like, he's lost his temper with Cameron, and he's lost his temper with Harper too. It's kind of like, I wanted him to have a moment of sort of making an active choice, really. And but yeah, in the scene prior to that, where Megan does the speech about, you know, which is sort of like, it feels like it sort of carries some of the central themes of the show in a way, but in this very quiet little two-hander moment. I remember, yeah, thinking that she did handled that so beautifully, I thought.
There's this great scene in the finale, this epic fight scene between you and Theo James. And it was almost like this was bound to happen. And I love that it happened in the ocean. And as an actor, how much prep work or fight choreography did you have to learn, or did you just kind of go at it together?
We had like an half-hour practice the day before, I think, with some stunt coordinators. And my memory of it is that the tide kept. They were also shooting on the beach, like other scenes, so the tide kept, like, sweeping us into shot. But no, I mean, like, we wanted obviously to have, you know, like, a series of things that we knew we needed to get through, and for it to be exciting, but also clearly two guys who are not trained in combat who are just kind of like having at each other, for there to be an element of comedy about it too, I guess. But I think more important than the actual fight for us was the lead up to it, and wanting to, because, like you say, there has been this subtext of, it's almost like, yeah, like it had to happen. It was bound to happen, and there was a sort of, like, quite a cathartic feeling about that scene, actually, that finally, like, the subtext of every scene was able to be played in this like fight. But to get to the point where Cameron has sort of crossed the line with Ethan in some way, and what is it that pushes him over the edge that he, you know, really can't hold it in anymore. And I mean, the interesting thing about it is that I think, in a way, the fact that Cameron has finally got a rise out of Ethan means that even though Ethan acquits himself quite well in the fight, in a way, it's like a loss for him until he sort of reconnects with Daphne and then with Harper later in the episode, because Cameron's like got a reaction. And up till then, Ethan's been so careful, like not to rise to it and to sort of let it go and not to play the game by Cameron's rules. And yeah, I've always thought that that was like one of the things that's going on, is that because for Ethan, he's partly worried about what his marriage is, I think, and that's frightening him. But he's also worried probably on some existential level. Like, it always read like there was something existentially going on with this guy. He keeps taking himself off to go for runs on his own. He's very quiet, often in scenes, and he seems like he's carrying a lot on his shoulders. And I wondered if that was partly to do with this sort of new identity as somebody of wealth. And Mike always talked about how he wanted Ethan to be somebody who had, you know, like worked his way into being in a good college, and he had made money because he had earned it and was smart, whereas maybe Cameron was someone who came from privilege and so never knew any different. And so he's suddenly in this like world of extreme privilege, and Cameron and Daphne sort of operate in the way that they do. And I guess Ethan is trying to play a different game. I felt like he's trying to play by what he thinks are more ethical rules, more sane rules, you know, more reasonable rules, and it's not working out. And so he realizes he just has to engage, and he has to play by this different set of rules. And that's either like a good thing, and it means that it's like broken some spell in Ethan and Harper's marriage, or they've taken some small piece of Daphne and Cameron, or it's you know, it's a bad thing, and he's surrendered to the behavior of the privileged, you know, of those, like, of even a kind of white privilege, maybe it felt like at times. So, and I like that, again, that there is like just various ways you could interpret it, but either way, it felt like it was a satisfying scene to have, and Theo was again like a really good scene partner, and you know, really game. So it was one of the most fun scenes to shoot, I'd say.
Yeah, I bet. And I could tell that watching it, like this is something you probably really enjoyed, and you're probably gonna remember that scene for quite a long time. Well, you know, at Gold Derby, we are huge awards fans, and I want to congratulate you on winning the SAG award with the whole cast.
Oh,
That must
thank
have
you.
been such a fun moment, like such a night you'll remember.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, like, it's a while ago that we shot the show now, and it was even then. So it was nice to see everyone. And yeah, the White Lotus is sort of truly an ensemble show, I think, at its heart.
Mhm.
So it was nice. It was nice for the cast to be recognized in that way. But yeah, thanks. It was fun.
And the Emmy nominations are coming up. This show, I'm guessing it's going to clean up in the nominations, just like season one did. And final question, well, what would it mean if you were to get a nomination from the Emmys?
I would just be very confused and surprised, but also grateful, like I was when I got cast in the first place.
Confused in a good way.
Yeah, I would be, but I would be very surprised. Yeah.
Well, thanks for chatting with us today, and best of luck at the nominations coming up.
Thank you so much. Cheers.